Okay, we're going to fill out a table today. We're going to be looking at the differences and or similarities of explicit formulas versus recursive formulas. Make a table that has 3 columns, and here we go. We're going to look at the type of thinking that is represented. We're going to look at an example using a table, using a diagram, and then what are the advantages and the disadvantages for that type of formula. So starting off, explicit formulas. That is the process that relates the input x with the output y. So in other words, an explicit formula can tell you what y is when you know x. For a recursive formula, it is a repeated process that uses one term to find a later term. A recursive formula can tell you the next y when you know the y before it. Recursive formulas need a starting point or initial value. An example for an explicit formula could be y is equal to 2x plus 1, or another example could be f of n, the function of n, is equal to 2 to the nth power. Those are both examples of explicit formulas. If you're given an input, which would be, in this case, x or n, given that input, you would be able to find the output, which is the y or the f of n. An example of a recursive formula would be saying, like, the function at 0 is 1, which is the required starting point or initial value. Then we can use the function of n is equal to the function of n minus 1, the previous output, or y, plus 4. Or you could say the function at 0 is 1, once again giving us that initial value. And then we could say the function of n is 2 times the function of n minus 1, which gets that previous value, and it must be doubled. Okay, so if we're using a table for an explicit formula, you would want to look across the rows to figure out the pattern used to get from the input value to the output value. If you're working with a recursive formula and you're using a table, you would look down the output column to figure out the pattern used to get from one y value to the next. If you're using a diagram for the explicit formula, you would compare the figure number, or the input, to the diagram. Using a diagram with a recursive formula, you would try to find the previous figure in the next figure. So what are advantages for the explicit formula? Well, they can be used to quickly find the output for any input. And what are advantages to a recursive formula? Recursive formulas make it very easy to find the next term in a sequence and think about the pattern of growth. Finally, what are disadvantages to the explicit formula? They are not as easy to identify the pattern of growth from one term to the next. For a recursive formula, the disadvantage is that it would not be efficient to find a term late in the sequence if you know only the first few terms.